Well, I'm out of here, good luck, and here I go. So this is the big overview of the general idea of a system of initiation within Rosicrucianism. And within this time, I've tried to give you a sense of the bigger context, as well as some of the actual practical exercises. And we are doing a workshop next weekend that is on this topic, working with the exercises and going into more detail on the context. And I'll open it up to any questions people have.
Would you please define concept again?
A concept, in the larger sense of it, is actually an ability for the mind to see a spiritual reality. It's the same thing as what in the Greek school, with the Platonists and the Pythagoreans, when they talked about seeing an ideal type or seeing an idea, they understood that that was actually a direct perception either of spirit and matter or a direct perception of the mind of God at this very high spiritual archetypal level that every tradition talks about, but they call it different things, in which the pattern of everything is given in the mind of God. And so that's what we're actually doing. When we can think with true spiritual concepts, that becomes what the Rosicrucians call sense-free thinking, and it's also linked to a deeper aspect that we haven't gone into tonight of the new clairvoyance that the Rosicrucians talk about. And again, that connects it back up because living thinking, true living thinking instead of dead thinking, living thinking connects us through that process with the mind of God itself, because it's all the same substance.
So, for example, as I would perceive somebody doing acts maybe that I didn't like.
Yes.
However, I saw their soul.
Yes.
And then that would be doing that act. Right?
Yes, it's directly connected to that Rosicrucian practice we mentioned, that when you see a person, you look for what inside of them is their spiritual core and their spiritual destination. What will this person become over great periods of time if their alchemical development continues on the right path? They're going to be something very, very special and unique. And to see the uniqueness of that, and also, again, as a way to deal with the less pleasant aspects they might be manifesting, to look at what type of suffering have they had, how do they suffer that has led them to act out in this way? Or how are they blinded or stuck in this purely reactive mind processes that keep them acting in this way? Was there, yes please?
A Sufi teacher that I work with says that path, that
Luciferic path?
path,
Huh?
he said that he felt at least that path is closed. I don't know if I'm in his lifetime, because he knows he's been a monk in many lifetimes, and he said in this time, he said that it's not as there like it used to be. He said, I know because I've knocked on that door now. And I just wondered if you agree with that.
My perspective,
There's still monks in there, whatever, but he feels like it's not as open as it was.
I think he might be speaking about it in terms of a monastic path, that is a type of path of isolation from the world and this type of thing.
It's not as open as it was.
I think that's probably true. I think that that monastic path is not quite as open as it used to be. It is still something, though, that is open and can be done for particular alchemical periods of time to create a sealed retort that one works within, that's very closely contained, where all the forces are held in. Spending an entire lifetime in it, that would be a larger question if that would be really beneficial for a person or not. I wouldn't pass a final judgment on it. I would separate that concept, though, of the monastic path as a life path as being different from the Luciferic pathway. The Luciferic pathway is always open because any person that chooses to follow a life that is not well grounded, or a spirituality that is kind of airy-fairy, not well grounded, and doesn't really lead to something for them or somebody else, that's a Luciferic pathway. Yes, please.
Do you think an astrology natal chart can say what kind of initiate we are, or indicate what kind of initiate we are primarily, and what stage that our soul is in this incarnation?
To a particular degree. The natal chart, what people that are really good with astrology or Vedic palmistry or whatever method of reading these things are, they use the basic blueprint as a structure of the soul. But then they need to look into the individual to see how far they are along the path. Because a whole bunch of people might have been born at that exact same time, but they're actually on different levels in the path, despite being born at the same moment. But one thing that you get from a natal chart is that there's a kind of imprinting of the geometry of the heavens at the time of incarnation. It's all pure geometry. If you look at a natal chart, it's all an angular relationship of this body, which has a vibrational quality, to this body, which has a vibrational quality. When those two vibrational qualities are directly opposite, it's different than if they're at 45 degrees, etc. It's a real study of sacred geometry and cosmic influences on a human being. So it relates to the person's structure in all kinds of very deep ways. You would still need to use a kind of a vertical approach to get a sense of how far are they along their particular pathway within that structure, because that could vary from one person to another who was born at that time. But one very important aspect of this is that we need to be aware that everybody's subtle body structures are a little bit different, so that we have certain structures in the subtle body that are universal. You know, we talk about the chakras, acupuncture meridians, etc. These are universal. But within that, there are other structures within the subtle bodies, within the life body, within the consciousness body, that are very different from person to person. Because every thought that you have, every feeling you have, every action you take actually sculpts the subtle bodies. That's how you become the person you become. And so one of the skills developed over time in this type of work or in sacred geometry work is to begin to recognize the different structures inside of people. And so for people that work as initiation teachers in different traditions, one of the major things that they do is they actually examine a person's structure, their psychological structure and their literal subtle body structures. They see what's been built there. And that'll tell them the current stage of the person's development and also what they need to do next. And in many cases, if the person who's doing the initiation work is very conscious as a teacher, they'll know that in many cases the person cannot do the same type of work the teacher does, because the teacher has crystallized themselves in a particular way, and this person doesn't have the structure for it. They have to actually do it a different way. I enjoyed it one time when I worked at the Clear Vision School in Australia, French medical doctor Samuel Sagan. That person asked him a question once of, how do you do this particular type of clairvoyant activity? And Sagan thought for a moment, and then he replied, you really shouldn't ask me how I do it, because you can't do it the way that I do it. I developed my capacity to do it a very long time ago, and you can't develop it the same way now. You need to ask me how you can develop it. And so once we can see what people's structures are, that can be very important. My last thing here, and then I'm going to have to wind up for the night, is that this also becomes something when we do any type of meditative practice from any tradition, because most of us are on an independent spiritual path where we are self-initiating. We might train with different people, etc. Most of us don't have one guru that tells us everything to do. Because of that, we learn a lot of different practices, a lot of different meditations, and we have to choose which ones am I going to do with my limited amount of time and energy on a regular basis, because those are going to change our destiny, choosing which ones to do. So at the end of the practices that we do here, I always have people check in for a moment before they come out of the practice, and I say, ask yourself the silent question, how has this practice structured my consciousness and my body of energy? And you need to check in anytime you do any practice and see what structures it's creating in you. You can actually feel something energetically beginning to form inside of yourself, or you can feel your consciousness taking on a particular perspective by these things. And for one person, that particular set of practices might be great. For another, it might not be the most effective way for them to get to the goal that they're going toward. Okay, thank you all very much. We're going to have to wind it up here. Thank you all very much for coming. Thank you.
We also have a minor announcement.
What's that?
This is Saturday evening, and the front doors and the garage doors, as well as the garage gate locks. So if anybody's in the garage, I have a key, because we have to let you out. If you go out the front door, you cannot get back in because the door is locked.
Okay, so if you're parked in the garage, he'll let you in and out.
Find me in, open it.
Thank you. You too. Yeah.
I wanted to tell you, with your list of the 7 stages, the occult scholar, the warrior, and the lion, it's just like Wizard of Oz, the scarecrow, the tomb.